The COBIT 5 Foundation Certificate. Module 3. COBIT 5 Enablers. Module Contents. Welcome to Module 3, where you'll learn about the 7 COBIT 5 Enablers. This module consists of 7 lessons. The first 4 lessons are: Lesson 1. Policies, Principles, and Frameworks. Lesson 2. Processes. Lesson 3. Organizational Structures. Lesson 4. Culture, Ethics, and Behavior. The remaining lessons are: Lesson 5. Information. Lesson 6. Services, Infrastructure, and Applications. Lesson 7. People, Skills, and Competencies. The information in this module relates to the third part of the syllabus, Syllabus Area Code EN. Remember, it's strongly recommended that you carry out further reading in the COBIT 5 Guide, A Business Framework for the Governance and Management of Enterprise IT, as part of your exam preparation. You can use your syllabus document to identify areas in the guide for further reading as part of your self-study. The syllabus document is provided in your course download area. This video provides you with an overview of the lesson contents for this module. We're going to briefly review each lesson in turn. Lesson 1 covers the Principles, Policies, and Frameworks enabler. Topics include the characteristics of good policies, the purpose of the policy lifecycle, and the good practice requirements for principles, policies, and frameworks. Lesson 2 covers the Processes enabler. Topics covered include key characteristics of process goal categories, activities in the process lifecycle, and process practices, activities, and work products. Lesson 3 examines the Organizational Structures enabler. Topics covered include good practices and roles. Lesson 4 looks at the Culture, Ethics, and Behavior enabler. Topics covered include good practices and enabler goals and organizational and individual ethics and behaviors. Lesson 5 deals with the Information enabler. Topics include the 5 steps of the information lifecycle, information attributes, and assessing information quality. Lesson 6 covers the Services, Infrastructure, and Applications enabler. Topics covered include the architectural principles governing the use of IT-related resources, and the relationship with other enablers. Finally, Lesson 7 examines the People, Skills, and Competencies enabler. Topics include good practices and skill categories. If you're ready, let's get started. Enjoy the module, and remember, our expert tutor team is there to support you. If you've got any questions, just use the link provided to contact them. The COBIT 5 Foundation Certificate. Module 3. COBIT 5 Enablers. Lesson 1. Principles, Policies, and Frameworks. Welcome to Module 3, Lesson 1, where you'll learn about the Principles, Policies, and Frameworks enabler. In this lesson, we'll study the characteristics of good policies, the purpose of the policy lifecycle, and the good practice requirements for principles, policies, and frameworks. Before we start, let's remember what we learned in Module 2 about enablers. The diagram on your screen shows the generic enabler model. We'll be referring to this throughout this module. It's a very important diagram. You'll remember the 4 enabler dimensions: stakeholders, goals, lifecycle, and good practices, and also the 4 questions that enabler performance management must answer. Are stakeholder needs addressed? Are enabler goals achieved? Is the enabler lifecycle managed? Are good practices applied? If you're unsure about these concepts, you might want to review Lesson 5 of Module 2 before continuing. A good starting point is to ask, what is the purpose of principles and policies? Simply stated, they are means by which the governors and managers communicate their wishes and instructions. They provide a framework that guides and constrains the decisions and actions taken by the enterprise and its staff. They are, in a sense, the rules that managers and staff must follow. These rules are chosen to support the attainment of the enterprise's goals and objectives. Principles are a high-level expression of the ethics and values of the enterprise. They provide an ethical framework for the enterprise in all its activities, and as such, they are unlikely to change significantly over time. In order to be effective, principles should be easily understood. They should be expressed in simple, clear language that everyone understands. For example, a principle might be that we will treat our customers honestly and fairly. Everyone should understand that. Principles should also be few in number. A multiplicity of principles will simply cause confusion. It probably also indicates a lack of understanding of what a principle is. Principles are essential, but are not sufficient on their own to provide an adequate degree of direction. For one thing, principles might be open to interpretation in particular circumstances. So, more detailed and more specific guidance is needed, which is where policies come in. Good policies are effective. They achieve their stated purpose. They are efficient. Policies exist to implement principles. Good policies will do this in an efficient manner. For example, an IT organization might adopt the principle of only making changes to its services that will benefit the enterprise. It could implement that principle by having a policy that required a cost-benefit analysis be done for all IT changes. This would be far from an efficient policy. This is perhaps a contrived example, but you probably get what we mean. A good policy is also non-intrusive. By this, we mean that it will be reasonable to the people who are expected to comply with it. Those who write the policy should take into account the practicalities of complying with it. Wherever possible, it shouldn't get in the way of people doing their jobs, and therefore creating resistance. If policies are to be complied with, then of course everyone in the enterprise must be aware of them. There are several aspects to this. Staff should know where to find copies of the policies, and it should be easy for them to access. Modern technology provides a number of ways of doing this. The enterprise should actively communicate policies to staff. Simply making them available will not be effective. Many organizations use technology-based tools not only to communicate policies to their staff, but also to monitor their understanding. This is particularly common in relation to security, health and safety, and regulatory policies. This is also relevant when policies change. Staff need to be informed that they have changed and what the new policy is. We've discussed the nature of frameworks in an earlier lesson. In this present context, we can say that governance and management frameworks, such as COBIT 5, will enable the enterprise to satisfy the governance and management requirements of its stakeholders. Such frameworks should provide comprehensive coverage of required areas, be flexible and capable of being easily modified to meet the changing needs of the stakeholders, and they should be current and up-to-date. They should match the current needs of the stakeholders and accepted good practice. Okay, we've looked at the nature of policies, principles, and frameworks. Now we'll examine the policy life cycle. The ultimate purpose of policies is to promote the efforts of the enterprise to satisfy the needs of its stakeholders. But those needs evolve and change over time, and the policies must be adapted to meet those changes. An obvious example is the regulatory environment, which can change quite swiftly. A policy framework plays an essential role here because it provides the structure needed for policies to be properly managed. This framework also helps the enterprise to maintain consistency between policies by maintaining an organizing principle. The diagram on your screen shows a version of the enabler model that's appropriate to the principles, policies, and frameworks enabler. The only difference between it and the generic model is the content of the good practices dimension. We've discussed some of these already. Other good practices for this enabler include: the scope and validity of the policies must be defined. For example, a common security policy is that passwords should not be written down. But what about the system administrator passwords on key servers? Can the enterprise afford for them to be recorded only in the heads of its technicians? Following on from this, the policy framework should document the way that exceptions should be handled. For example, by reference to a higher tier of management. Failure to comply with policies should have consequences that should be spelled out in the policy framework. We know of organizations where policies are just pieces of paper. Managers do not enforce compliance. Finally, the enterprise must establish a means of monitoring compliance with policies. To take a very simple example, an organization we know has a tidy desk policy as part of its wider security policies. Managers monitor compliance by walking around the offices and checking the desks. Okay, the last topic we need to cover is the relationship between the Principles, Policies, and Frameworks enabler and the other enablers. Let's use an exercise to do this. Aim to spend 20 minutes on this exercise, and don't forget to check out your study guide for some suggestions. The Principles, Policies, and Frameworks enabler supports the performance of the other enablers, and in turn, its performance is supported by them. Describe this mutual support for each of the enablers. We'll show you a reminder of the other enablers on the next screen. Here's a reminder of the other enablers. How will Principles, Policies, and Frameworks support them? How will they support the Principles, Policies, and Frameworks enabler? This completes this lesson on the COBIT Principles, Policies, and Frameworks enabler. You learned about the characteristics of good policies, the purpose of the policy lifecycle, and the good practice requirements for principles, policies, and frameworks. Before we complete this lesson, here's a quick quiz to test what you've learned. At the end of the quiz, you'll receive your result and can try the questions again if you would like to. Lesson 2 of Module 3 is the next lesson. In that lesson, you'll learn about the COBIT Processes enabler.